Hello and welcome to South Asia Chat, a podcast brought to you by the Institute of South Asian Studies at the National University of Singapore. I'm your host, Ramita Iyer, a research analyst at the Institute. Almost 6 years after the Indian Supreme Court declared that privacy was a constitutional right for all citizens, the government is now close to passing the Digital Personal Data Protection Bill 2022. The bill was passed by the Indian Cabinet earlier this month on 5th July and will be tabled in the Parliament during the ongoing monsoon session. In this episode, we will be discussing data issues in cybersecurity with Dr. Anuradha Rao, founder CyberCognizanz Singapore. She's also non-resident fellow at ISAS and associate faculty at the Public Safety and Security program at the Singapore University of Social Sciences. Anuradha, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Ramita. It's great to be here.
So it has been several years of discussion, debate, and dissent surrounding the data protection framework, and we are now finally very close to having data protection enshrined into the Indian law. Could you share some insights on the journey of this bill, but also specifically on how the legislative framework can address concerns pertaining to privacy and data security?
Absolutely. The current bill, like you've just said, Ramita, is a culmination of earlier efforts pertaining to privacy, and this was upheld by the Supreme Court as a fundamental right in 2017. And it's been a long and winding journey because previous versions of the bill have been stalled. And this is another attempt at framing legislation for data protection. So we're actually expanding the ambit of this law to move from privacy, which is obviously very important, to also include data protection. And we're looking at the ongoing monsoon session of Parliament to see what is exactly going to unfold anytime now. And to answer your question about what exactly the bill is about and how does it address concerns pertaining to privacy and data security? Well, the bill is a significant piece of legislation, and for many reasons, because first of all, it's going to be a more comprehensive approach to protecting the right to privacy of Indian citizens. And this is something, given that we live in a digital society and economy, expanding this right to address data security is crucial, given that most of our interactions are happening online. And another reason why it's significant is because it actually puts India on the right side of the global trend towards data protection legislation. And if I'm not mistaken, currently over 70% of countries have such legislation in place. In Singapore, we have the Personal Data Protection Act, and we can see that the trend towards protecting data and privacy is a step in the right direction. And what was one of the good things about this process is, while the process was not perfect, the effort was there to make it more consultative and inclusive, which is obviously a great step forward in transparent policy making. But there's also still several areas of concern, and these include exemptions given to central government agencies. There's also the point about appointment and the criteria for the Data Protection Board. And another sticky issue among many still is the lack of clear criteria for trusted countries for cross-data flow. So this is just some of the things that people that are interested in this bill are going to be looking at to see which way the policy making goes.
So, at the heart of the conversation, then, as it has evolved over the years, is personal data. Why is it important to protect such data, and how does it relate to issues of cybersecurity?
Okay, excellent. So let me quickly first define what personal data is, and then we'll understand why it's so important. So personal data is any information that is used to identify an individual. So say for most of us, it would be, or it's also known as personally identifiable information, whether it's address, employment details, a driver's license, credit card, so that's financial information, or information like medical information. Now, these are personal, these are sensitive pieces of information, and as such, they need to be guarded for many reasons. And it's very cliched, you hear this term, but data is the new gold, and it is valuable for many reasons. And partly this relates to what I've said earlier, which is data allows us access to services and to transact in this digital ecosystem, and hence it forms part of our digital identity. And that's why it's such an important thing. Now, exactly for this reason, we should have more control over our own data. We as individuals need to know who collects it. We need to know how it's stored and used. And even more important, we need to know how to safeguard it. And it's not just about organizations collecting data that need to do it, because of course that is crucial. And this is the area that I work on, which is why I'm highlighting it, is it requires awareness and actions by individuals. That's you and me, any of us who have a digital identity, to protect our own data. So it's really important for us as individuals also to know more about this bill and why it's so important for us as part of this digital system that we're in. And your second question, related question, was how it's related to cybersecurity. So I would say that because personal data is, so much of it is available online, and it's really important to not let it fall into the wrong hands. Now, when it comes to the issue of cybersecurity, this includes cyber criminals and other actors who can use it for a variety of bad actions. So we hear so much about cybersecurity these days, and it is because there are a vast range of cyber criminals that are trying to access our data in a variety of ways. And this doesn't just affect our personal safety and security, but it actually has implications for national safety and security, which is why the bill is so important, because it's not just about individuals protecting their data, but it goes above and beyond to talk about how we can keep our national assets safer. And this is how it's related to cybersecurity. And I wanted to highlight this element because the bill is often talked about in relation, of course, to the right to privacy. And a lot of the conversations have been about the digital economy. The talks have been about data localization and cross-border data flows that impact businesses, and rightly so. But we also need to highlight the implications of this bill in terms of online safety and cybersecurity. And I think that is one of the key elements that I wanted to discuss today.
So, coming back to the legislative framework itself, I want to unpack a few things that you mentioned initially. The first is that the bill calls for the establishment of a data protection board, which will be the de facto data regulator. Now, critics have questioned this body, its future powers, and as well as its independence. Do you think the Indian state has the capacity to undertake this mammoth task?
That's a great question. I think the issue itself of the Data Protection Board is a bit of a controversial topic, because in the current version of the bill, the power of appointing the chief of the board lies with the central government. And that's certainly a cause for concern, because the need for an independent regulator is fairly obvious, and it has been highlighted by many experts. Now, hopefully, the government has taken this sentiment into account, and it does take the necessary steps to create an independent regulator. We also need criteria for appointments that are clearer, and that these two things at the bare minimum would certainly go a long way in undertaking this task in a more free and fair manner. And there is a dangerous trend of the government trying to compromise the authority and independence of independent regulators. And I say this as seen in terms of some of the more recent events regarding the working of the information commissions and the information commissioners under the Right to Information Act. In the early 2000s, I worked on the ground in another past life where I worked on public policy and in the not-for-profit space, and I worked on the ground on the right to information in Karnataka and as part of the right to information movement broadly. And I know how crucial it is for these bodies to be independent. So with the Data Protection Board, I guess what I'm trying to say is if it meets those criteria to have an independent body, that goes a long way towards the Indian state having capacity to better undertake this mammoth task, as you put it.
Another aspect that you highlighted was on cross-border data flows. So according to the newer versions of the bill, this will be permitted with selected trusted countries of the government's choosing. But it's not clear what criteria or categories the government will use to make this judgment. So in some way, we can say that localization effectively returns in a new form. What are the implications of this for online safety and cybersecurity?
So the government has moved away from its earlier focus on excessive localization, which is a good move because it works in the interests of simplifying business procedures for Indian companies and startups, but also moving away from excessive data localization also works well for cybersecurity. And cybersecurity advocates and experts have in the past also pointed out the harmful effects of data localization on cybersecurity. And if I have to put it very simply, excessive emphasis on localization would actually create further obstacles to information sharing between organizations. And when it comes to reducing cyber risk, information sharing, and especially in real time, is crucial. So you could see one of the reasons why allowing for greater cross-border data flows is something that cybersecurity advocates have been asking for. Another danger of excessive localization is that it creates barriers to actually integrated cybersecurity solutions within an organization. And it also prevents organizations from using services from other organizations if they are not, especially if they're not located in the country. So this move to simplify data flows is definitely a good move for people that are looking to reduce cyber threat risks. And I think that's everyone that there is, because cyber threats are amongst the most common and prevalent problem these days for organizations and governments. So the need to foster collaboration is crucial. And I think this new move that the bill is taking will hopefully be able to resolve some of the issues with the previous version of the bill.
So to just end our conversation on the topic of online safety, can citizens trust that their data will be protected given the lapses in cybersecurity?
It's a great question. I think only time will tell, but I do think that we are moving in a right direction because by introducing this framework and proposing tough penalties for data breaches, I do feel that the government has put greater onus on companies that collect and store data to safeguard it. And this is not just government organizations, it also includes MNCs and private companies. And one of the big topics of conversation has been the role of social media companies and their relations to online safety. And if you'd recall, there's been a long-standing battle between the Indian government and big tech. especially social media companies, about internet regulation. And we've seen this in the events surrounding the IT rules 2021. And with that piece of legislation, just as I felt that companies needed to take more responsibility for what is put up on their platforms, companies need to be responsible for how online harms emanate from their platforms, and they need to have grievance redressal mechanisms that need to address this quickly and firmly. So similarly with this bill, I feel that companies will need to take greater responsibility for the safety of the personal data of their users. And this goes a long way towards keeping them from online harms. And what would this require? It would require robust cybersecurity measures on the part of these organizations, and these should go beyond compliance-based procedures. They need to adopt a robust framework, and they need to have a whole of organization cybersecurity aware culture. And this includes training and awareness. And the reason that I highlight this is because, again, my work is based on cybersecurity awareness. And one of the key elements, and this is what I mentioned earlier, is to ensure that citizens, individuals, you and me, know enough about the importance of our personal safety, and that organizations with employees as a whole are aware of the implications of not safeguarding data adequately. And this should not just be about the penalties, but it should just be about a culture that we start understanding the importance of data protection and cybersecurity in general, given that these are some of the biggest threats that affect our digital economy and society today.
Anuradha, thank you so much for being on the podcast. You were listening to South Asia Chat. To learn more about our work, visit us at isas.nus.edu.sg. You can also get updates on social media. We're on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram.